name is Sonya Clark. I'm an artist and an educator. I live in Amherst, Massachusetts, and I'm originally from Washington, D.C. I was trained as a textile artist, but I expand the definition of that to include hairstyling and those who make us beautiful in that way. It was my first time working at all in hot glass at Pilchuck, and many of the things that I learned there allowed me to make prototypes for the kinds of things that we're making here. The project that I'm working on is a project that's based on Toni Morrison's first novel, The Bluest Eye. And so my project is all about eyes and all about marigolds, all about capturing that black girl magic as a salve and a pushback, actually, at the damage of white supremacy in this nation. So we have made eyeballs that are also vessels. These eyeballs are larger than your head, but really like this scale, and the irises of the eyeballs can be removed so that things can go inside of those eyes. The magic, my black girl magic, will be happening inside of those eyeballs. So the irises are different colors, but the pupils are clear so you can see what's happening inside. Everything has to do with eyes and marigolds. Marigolds is healing for how we see each other and who we see through the lenses of our own eyes. You know, if you think about our eyes as being vessels, like they take in everything from the world, right? But they also are responsible for how we treat others in the world, right? So I was thinking, if people have eyes that have been filled with negative images of black and brown people and people who belong to marginalized communities, then those eyes need to be cleaned and healed. So we've been working on making these eye-washing vessels, and just at the bottom of the vessel is a little marini with a marigold in the center, just where your iris would be. So sort of like wash your eyes with this, and hopefully you will also be healed with that black girl magic so that you can see us properly and do us right.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Jabari Owens-Bailey. I am a curatorial education program manager here at Museum of Glass, and you are part of our Visiting Artists lecture series right now. And today I am here to introduce the brilliant artist Sonya Clark. And I'm going to read a little bit of her artist statement so that you can have an idea of how she describes herself. I create installations and objects in tangent with an urgent exploration of materials. I gather dust, locate embedded meaning, and unearth historical imbalances. Recurring themes include intersections of text, textiles, and hair to celebrate blackness and reclaim freedom while interrogating injustices. My process is grounded in exchange of stories and the transmission of craft techniques between individuals, communities, and generations, from DNA coiled in my hair to the embodiment of epigenetic memories. I am a repository of all who have come before me. I am a collaboration, not singular, but a collective. My artwork is as well. In over 500 exhibits, I have tactilely and tactically used textiles in concert with other materials as cultural interfaces to unravel complex issues. My 60th solo exhibit, We Are Each Other, a traveling museum survey of works from 30 years, includes the Haircraft Project, Unraveling and Monumental Cloth Projects like these have engaged thousands of participants and received accolades in Mother Jones, NYT, Art Forum, Huffington Post, Hyperallergic, NPR, BBC, and other media outlets. My work has been supported with residencies, grants, and fellowships from the Smithsonian, Yaddo Anonymous Was a Woman, Monument Lab, Pollock-Krasner, United States Artists, among others. Sonya Clark's work has been exhibited in 500 plus venues worldwide and is included in numerous museum collections. A professor at Amherst College and recipient of 4 honorary doctorates. Clark is a United States Artist Fellow and has received awards from Pollock-Krasner and Anonymous Was a Woman, among others. Sonya Clark is an amazing artist, and we are lucky to have her here as a visiting artist. And without further ado, Sonya Clark.
Thank you, Jabari. Thank you all for coming, and really the pleasure is mine. This has been an amazing experience working with the artists who live on this hot shop floor, taking the ideas that live in my head and manifesting them through their, I think collectively, maybe 100 years of skill. Right? Like I could never catch up to that. So it's really, really a blessing. So I want to thank all of you who have gathered here. I want to thank the ancestors who have brought us here for making our bodies, our souls, and our spirits. I'm grateful to the individuals and institutions that made my presence in this space with you possible this afternoon. And today, I've done this recently a few times, I want to dedicate this talk to the poets, artists, activists who have taught us to stand with purpose and to love ourselves in community despite all the forces that seek to eradicate our love, our purpose, our humanity, our cultures, and often even our bodies. I dedicate this talk to those who have persisted despite the genocides that have occurred on this land and the genocides that are occurring worldwide. I dedicate this to all those who work towards a multicultural democracy and who understand that no life is more valuable than any other. That's not an All Lives Matter statement. That is saying no life is more valuable than any other. So I want to share with you that this gentleman, Paul Robeson, who I never met, this quote by him lives as a guidepost in my studio, a guiding light. You can read it, but I will read it to you. The artist must elect to fight for freedom or for slavery. I have made my choice. I had no alternative. So these words are in my studio, but we do not go it alone. We do this work together because we must. The alternative is detrimental to the whole. When one is enslaved, we all are. That is clear. Robeson himself was deeply influential as a figure and a celebrity. His father was enslaved, made to be unfree, but he escaped his enslaver. And Paul Robeson, the son, was such a prominent celebrity and activist that the U.S. government sought to rein him in by seizing his passport. The tactics have not changed. But he persisted, as we all must persist. And so I have these lovely facts about Paul Robeson. I could talk for hours just about him. But he was born 33 years to the day that the Confederates surrendered at Appomattox. And that was the battle that effectively ended the Civil War. One could argue that the Civil War is still going on, but let's say that the historians agree on this. And then he died in 1976, which is a bicentennial of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So this man whose father was enslaved died on the day died 200 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So as I think most of you know, I'm not a glass worker, and so I'm a textile artist, and often people will say, oh, you're a textile artist, do you weave? And actually, I like to say I'm an unweaver of things. So many of you are familiar with this flag, yes? Yes? unfortunately. This is the thing. I believe in the power of cloth. It can be used for good and it can be used for bad. I think that cloth can be a monument. In this case, this was one that symbolizes white supremacy, white nationalist terrorism in this nation and also abroad. I see the Confederate flag in lots of places around the world. For 12 years, I lived in Richmond, Virginia, which was the seat of the Confederacy. And there I worked as the chair of the Craft and Material Studies at Virginia Commonwealth University. And so this flag was prevalent in that town. And so I invited people, as I do with most of my work, to join me in taking it down thread by thread. And so this is a series. It's been performed on many occasions. You're seeing two pieces, both unraveling, that's the performance, and unraveled, which is the completely dismantled piece. Unraveling, as it disappears and as people help me undo it, the piece becomes more valuable. So those museums that have one of these in addition, as we unravel it, and when it eventually disappears, that makes it most valuable. The first time I performed this piece was in with the sesquicentennial of the end of the Civil War, so this was in 2015, and it was performed in New York. And just days after this first performance, Dylan Roof did what Dylan Roof did. I'm wondering how many of you might know what president's hat this is on the left. Say it loud. Lincoln, right. So you all know Lincoln's hat. How many of you know what the cloth is on the right? Anybody? Yeah, so that's the cloth that actually ended the Civil War. Right, see, and everybody's going, wait, what? How come I knew one of the battle flags, but I didn't know that one, right? So I was at the Smithsonian doing an artist research fellowship, and I saw Lincoln's top hat, so I gravitated towards that because I'm always interested in the Civil War and what was happening then. And right next to Lincoln's top hat was this half a dishcloth. You can see it's been cut in half. And the text said that this was the Confederate flag of truce that was used to surrender at Appomattox. Now, this is one of the things that artists can do. That happened on April 9th, 1865. One of the things that artists can do is to make things that are unknown or erased historically larger than life and monumental. So I went about with the folks at the Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia. It's a museum that ironically is in a former flag factory. And they helped me make the truce flag whole, so this Confederate surrender flag whole, and 100 times the scale. So it's 15 by 30 feet. And then that original one that I showed you was at the Smithsonian, as I told you, at the Museum of American History. And now this has been collected by the Smithsonian and lives in the Museum of American Art at the Smithsonian in my hometown of Washington, D.C. But that's not enough. It's one thing to call this piece monumental and to bring it into the view so it doesn't remain an unknown artifact. I invited people to weave with me. So this piece is called Reconstruction Exercise. People sat down at looms and they were weaving the structure of the truce flag, of the Confederate truce flag, in these long, elongated scrolls. And so you see all the glitches of people learning how to weave this structure that becomes a monument to the end of white supremacy. And this is a version of it when it was at my solo show at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York. Collectively made, collectively learning about that object. So that show, which Jabari mentioned, traveled, and the show was called We Are Each Other. We're going to get to those words at the end of this talk, but the show was called We Are Each Other. There's a catalog if you're interested, though it's, for a while it was out of print because it's sold out, but I think they've reprinted them now. And then the cover of the catalog is from this collaborative project that I did in 2014, I think. Well, these are all ancient history. Called the Haircraft Project. And in my work, I think of hairdressing as a primordial textile art form. Like, this is the first way in which we're manipulating a thread, in this case, or the fiber that we grow. And the fiber that we grow, that's very powerful, because in that fiber that you grow is the DNA of all the people that have come before you. So ancestral legacies are held in our hair. I don't think of hairdressing as being simply a thing about vanity. I really consider it a ritual act. And so these are the 12 hairdressers that I worked with. You can see their faces. What I love about this is that I am wearing their artwork on my head. And when many people have seen this exhibit, some people will come to me and say, if you ever need a model, let me know. I say, no, I'm the model. And I always think that that's testimony to the poetry and artistry of these women that I had the pleasure of working with. And then this project is now in the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And there's a way in which people talk about, like, grandmothers crocheting or knitting with a kind of derogation, or women braiding their hair in a derogatory way. I will tell you that this piece won Art Prize, which is one of the largest prizes in the US. And with that funding, I split it among all of the women. And many of them said, maybe we should stop being hairdressers and become artists. And I was like, no, you're already artists, and you do a commissioned artwork. Like, so when you do someone's hair, they pay you first. Let me show you the storage of all my artwork I've ever made. It is not in museums yet. Anyway, I will say that if you want to understand freedom or unfreedom in this country, you need not look any further than the treatment of the most marginalized, and in this case, black women, and the policing of our bodies. I think of these women as being poets. I think of, again, this connection between textile, hair, and hairdressing. And I think about how in our hair is the stories of our lives. And I think about how if we had a dreadlock that was made from the beginning of someone's life until the end of their life, it would be about 30 feet long. So this is a book of a continuous print of a dreadlock. And I think about this as, like, imagine if you knew that you were going to live 100 years, or that that's what fate had held for you, how much wisdom there could be held in you. But I think also of this book as being like folded hands, as a prayer for black lives to be long and not cut short by the systemic racism and police brutality that routinely turns murderous in this nation. So when I've been doing this work around hair, sometimes those who are gendered male will say, well, where are we in this? And so I went into the barbershops and asked them if they would read a poem by Calvin Hernton, the late Calvin Hernton. And for that, they would get a haircut. So I went into these barbershops in Miami, and that is Killer Mike. If any of you are hip-hop fans, that's Killer Mike in Atlanta, Georgia. He has a barbershop as well. And every man who read this poem would get a free haircut. I'm going to read the poem to you very quickly, just in case you can't see it so well there. I am not a metaphor or a symbol. This you hear is not the wind in the trees, nor a cat being maimed in the street. I am being maimed in the street. It is I who weep, laugh, feel pain or joy, and I speak this because I exist. This is my voice. These words are my words. My mouth speaks them, my hand writes. I am a poet. I also think about hairdressers as a way that hairdressers can be treated as if that's not a like big and important career choice. I completely disagree with that. Madam C.J. Walker was a woman who was born 100 years before I was born, but 3 years after the end of the Civil War in 1867. And she, or 2 years after the end of the Civil War. And she wrote these words. I'm a black woman who worked in the cotton fields of the South. I promoted myself to the washtub. I was promoted to the washtub. I was promoted to the kitchen, and I promoted myself to the business of hair on my own ground. Madam C.J. Walker, this is a photo. This is an interpretation that I've made of her, made out of unbreakable plastic combs. By the time she died in 1919, she was one of the first self-made women millionaires. You will hear black women millionaires, that's because people want you to know that she's black, but she was one of the first self-made women millionaires in this nation. I want you to think about that. That is before black women or black people, before women could vote, and certainly well before black people could vote. Anyway, she was a breaker of many barriers, and she was someone who believed in providing women with economic freedom and empowerment and self-care. That earned her as the attention as being a Negro subversive. She was also someone who was an avid anti-lynch activist. So when I think of my hair, I think that even now, it's only in 25 states that have passed the Crown Act. That means that my hair in its natural state, the way that it grows out of my head, is legal. In other places, there's nothing to protect me from saying that my hair in this state is unprofessional, it needs to be straightened, and it needs to be done in a white supremacist way or according to white beauty standards. 25 states, you all, still have this nation. That's a kind of unfreedom. I think about, you all know that I love text, and so one of the things that I do with text is to go to great women writers like Ntozake Shange, who famously wrote these words: "Where there is a woman, there is magic." In 1976, Ntozake Shange wrote, "For colored girls who considered suicide when the rainbow was enough." This is it's a piece comprised of 20 separate poems choreographed to music that weaves the interconnected stories of love, empowerment, struggle, and loss into a complex representation of black sisterhood. The cast consists of 7 nameless African-American women only identified by color: the lady in red, the lady in orange, the lady in yellow, green, blue, etc. And so this is in honor to Ntozake Shange and that particular piece of writing and the choreograph poem. I love my audience because when I showed people that piece prior, someone said to me, "Do you know the print that Elizabeth Catlett made to sell to try and free Angela Davis when she was incarcerated for being a black activist?" And I did not, but now I do. And I think about this again, Elizabeth Catlett, the first black woman to have gotten an MFA in this nation. She's using her artwork to help free an activist. She's using her artwork as activism. First piece of artwork I ever bought was a print by Elizabeth Catlett, which hangs proudly in my home. It cost me a lot of money at the time. I've never regretted owning it. So, we're here to think about freedoms and unfreedoms. And the work that I've been doing in the Hot Shop is all based around The Bluest Eye, Toni Morrison's first book. And Toni Morrison famously said that the function of freedom is to free somebody else. If you pause and think about that, if you feel free in any way, and you think that your freedom is only yours, and it isn't your responsibility to make sure that that freedom is shared, you're probably subjugating someone else, if you really think about it. So Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye is a book that I've read over and over and over again, probably 100 times. When Toni Morrison died in 2019, I'm assuming everyone knows who Toni Morrison is. Let me just pause. Toni Morrison is one of the most important writers in the world. She died in 2019. She was the first black American to receive a Nobel Prize for her writing. This is her first novel that has influenced me. Again, you see that I'm using these fine-tooth pocket combs. I think of them as being gendered and racialized. And here what I've done is I have thread wrapped each of the combs with every color that Toni Morrison uses symbolically in her book in the order that she mentions them, and I made this long scroll of them. When I think about freedoms and unfreedoms, I also think about how like the small places that unfreedoms live. So I made this piece, Writer Type Pen and Sword, as I was thinking about the Civil War, because Remington, the typewriter company, is also Remington, the arms company. Same guns and typewriters. So that's why this piece is called Writer Type, a play on that, and Pen and Sword. You can see that the keys are covered with someone's hair of African descent. It is my own hair. It doesn't really much matter that it's the artist's hair. But I started thinking what stories are told, what stories are published, who holds those stories, what power there is held in storytelling. And then I started thinking that if this typewriter was typing, it wouldn't be typing in the Roman alphabet. And here comes a small unfreedom. The Roman alphabet has been a tool of cultural domination so that it holds more languages than any other script. Scripts have been erased because of the Roman alphabet. And so as a kind of reclamation, I made this twist key, which is based on the curl pattern of African hair. I then took every single page and every single word of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, transliterated it into that twist font, and then printed them on top of each other, and that makes this black hairy mass. And this print, when it is framed behind glass, it becomes a mirror, so you see yourself in the thickness of Toni Morrison's words. And then this piece, The Hewest Eye, is about this connection to that comb piece that I showed you earlier. It too is a print, but it's an embroidered print on paper. So this is every word that Toni Morrison uses to describe colors. There's these places where she says things like red and white, or red and green, or green and white, and that's where you see those sort of vertical stripes. But every stitched block is the length of a word. So red would be short, whereas black would be a little longer. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye begins with this incipit, or these opening words. Quiet as it's kept, there were no marigolds in the fall of 1941. And it ends with, the entire country was hostile to marigolds that year. This soil is bad for certain kinds of flowers. Certain seeds it will not nurture, certain fruit it will not bear. And when the land kills of its own volition, we acquiesce and say, the victim had no right to live. When Toni Morrison passed away, I was shook because I was really close to meeting her, and I didn't get the chance. So I started in this novel that I have read and reread, I started taking marigolds from my own garden and pressing them between the pages of her book, sort of pressing Toni Morrison's words in. She uses marigolds as a symbol of Black lives thriving. And so I wanted these marigolds to have a longer life, to live as long as possible. And so to press her words in was one way of doing that. And you can see that I've formed them into this oculus, this eye, sort of like what's above us here, as this way of thinking about Toni Morrison keeping her eye on us. And I continue to do this. This piece will continue to grow as more marigolds grow in my garden and as I continue to press them between the pages of The Bluest Eye. I want to just tell you a little bit about this magical moment in The Bluest Eye where these two little girls decide that they're going to plant marigold seeds to save their friend who has had terrible, terrible things happen to her because of white supremacy and internalized self-hatred. And they're witnessing that none of the adults are doing anything, and they believe they can change her fate by doing some black girl magic. And that black girl magic is to plant these marigold seeds. And to me, this notion of if we could all embrace that little bit within us of hopefulness that we can make change, that would be a huge thing. So I think about Toni Morrison as being one of the cultural ancestors that oversees me and oversees my work. It has to be good enough for Toni, right, to pass muster. Thankfully, with these people, it is. This excellent team here. So I don't normally work in glass, but I do sometimes work with glass beads. And so I was making these eyes of the ancestors. That large one that you see is Toni Morrison's eye. The smaller one is Nina Simone's eye. I make these all the time. They become other pieces. I think of them as being like protection, sort of like those evil eyes that you've seen that are meant to ward off evil. That's what is happening with these as well. Because I was making these, and because someone from this organization called Monument Lab asked me if I would be willing to do a piece around the Declaration of Independence, and I had made work about the Declaration of Independence before, and they said, would you consider taking over the Declaration House in Philadelphia, which is where Thomas Jefferson and his enslaved valet, Robert Hemings, who was also his brother-in-law, hold on to that thought, he enslaved his own brother-in-law, that this is where this is the site where Thomas Jefferson was penning ideas of freedom foundational to this nation, while also being someone who enslaved over 600 people in his lifetime. And so descendants of Monticello at Declaration House takes over the museum, and in each window are videos, I'm not playing a video for you, but are videos of eyes of descendants of those who Thomas Jefferson enslaved at Monticello, being watchful over our democracy. The last piece that I want to share with you this afternoon is called Finding Freedom. Finding Freedom I made months after I made Monumental. So Monumental was the truce flag that I showed you previously. That was the largest piece of cloth that I'd ever made. And then right after that, I made something that's so much larger. This one is 1,500 square feet. So it's the size of your average footprint of a home in this nation. It would fit in this space. It is made up of thousands and thousands of cloths that have cyanotype in them and that have been worked in such a way that they appear to be a starry night. With random sprinklings of seeds, we use seeds to do the cyanotypes. They don't appear in the piece, but they're the one. That's what makes for those little white speckles against the blue. And then just these random. So the random seeds make the speckled stars, and then within the piece, within the 1,500 square feet, there are also very intentionally placed Big Dippers. As Big Dippers are, of course, what people like freedom fighters like Harriet Tubman used to guide us towards freedom, to guide those who were enslaved towards freedom. The piece is called Finding Freedom, and among the many people who helped make this piece were people who are currently embroiled in our carceral system. So there were these incarcerated gentlemen that made these pieces with me, along with many other people. And when I was working with them, one of them said to me, like a real tough guy, you know, like big muscles, been working out a lot, been there for a long time. He said, so how are you going to light this piece? And the very egotistical artist in me said, you know, it's going to a museum. They'll figure it out. But the teacher in me, who was much more humble, said, well, what are you thinking? And he said, I think if you use black light, like UV light, it'll make the blue really blue and the white really pop white. And so this piece, while it lives in a darkened space, is illuminated by the vision of someone who is made to be unfree in this nation. And so I want to end with the final words of a poem that Gwendolyn Brooks wrote to Paul Robeson. So where we began was Paul Robeson, and this is a poem that the final words that Gwendolyn Brooks wrote to Paul Robeson, and they're words for us to remember. That we are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, and we are each other's magnitude and bond. And with that, I thank you. And now we have to get back to work, right?
Well, we generally have a Q&A at this time.
Oh, good. Yes, I'm happy to take questions.
So yeah, we would like to have some questions from the audience.
Questions or reflections? Yes, sir? Oh, the poem, yes. Is it up? There it is, yes. So this is just the last 3 lines of the poem, but this is also what I named my show after. We are each other.
I have a question.
Yes.
Were you aware if Toni Morrison was able to see your pieces or the collection of pieces?
Toni Morrison died before I started making this work that I've shown you. So she died in 2019, and the few works that I showed you have been made since her death, right? I would love to think, but I've been making artwork for 30 years. I would love to think that Toni Morrison had seen my work in one of those 500 shows that I've had. But I have no proof of that. But let's just pretend she had.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful talk. I had a question about the poem in the barber shop that you used in the barber shop. I was wondering why you paired that poem in particular with that situation, because I think the first line was something like "I am not a metaphor." I'm wondering if there's a connection there with hair, or something about hair that makes.
No, it's not a connection with hair. It's that I was working with black men. And it was really because someone said, oh, you do all this work that has to do, you know, they're gendering me, and they're saying you do all this work around hair, and that has to do with women, as if men don't grow hair.
Right.
And then I thought, well, it's because I've done the Haircraft Project, and that project got a lot of attention in the world, you know, in my small art world, right? Not in the world, art world. And so I thought I need to do something that is clearly about men. And the reason I picked that poem is I was working with an organization called Oh Miami. And Oh Miami, during April, which is Poetry Month, does this fabulous thing. They try and expose everyone in Miami-Dade County, that's a lot of people, to a poem during the month of April.
Oh, wow.
And then they invite artists and poets to do something around that. And I said, well, I'm not a poet, but let's find a good poem, and let's go into some barbershops, because I've been accused of not loving on my brothers, so let's go love on my brothers, right? And so they helped me select that poem. And then one of the reasons we selected it is because it is by a black author. Calvin Herndon taught at Oberlin College for many years, and he's no longer with us. But the poem itself is really if you read it, it's about a kind of police brutality. Like, I'm not a metaphor. I'm not just this random, like, symbol of black manness. I am an actual human being. I have feelings, right? And I have resistance. And if you can hear my words, I love this part, that if you can hear my words, right, that it's my fist beating against your ear, like it gets right into your brain, and the way that our ears actually function with that little tap tap, which is how you're hearing me now, right? And how I listen to Toni Morrison these days, like with headphones on, with her little, like, not little, with her deeply sonorous, like molasses voice.
She had an amazing voice, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Also, if you all just have comments, it helps me make the next work. It really does.
I have a question.
Uh-oh.
A lot of this work is very much based on history, research, and craft. How did you arrive at this as a working methodology? And what do you generally want people to take away from how you are manipulating these historical tropes? And also the idea of craft and how it relates.
Oh, so 3 questions, and none of them small. And I have witnesses. Okay. So the first one, how did I get to craft? So here's the thing. I think that a lot of the things that we do when we are small, as children, would fall into what people call craft. I actually don't really love this art and craft divide, because I think that it is about the global South. Like, people make very intense things, but somehow they're not thinking. They're decorative things, but there's no wisdom in it. I resist that completely. I refuse it, right? This is deep embodied knowledge, right? I cannot do what these folks do, right? Because of their deeply embodied knowledge, right? I can't do what the gaffers do. I can't do what Ben and Sarah and Gabe do. I can't do it, right? I don't have that embodied knowledge. I respect that as a deep wisdom. Okay. The other thing that I will say about that is that Africans who were stolen from their homelands and brought here were often valued for those wisdoms more than their humanity. So Joe, renamed Joe, right, is known for being a blacksmith, a basket maker, right, a ceramicist, whatever, right? Skills, embodied knowledge, but somehow not human and not intellectual, right? I resist that as well. I refuse it and I resist it. My grandmother is a person who taught this weak-eyed child, I've been wearing glasses since I was like 4 and 5, and she taught me how to thread a needle in a way that I teach my students now at Amherst College. I still teach them because they don't know how to thread needles, because it's a generational thing. Anyway, but my grandmother taught me how to thread a needle in a way that was a kind of embodied knowledge. And just from teaching me how to thread a needle, I'm here with you now. So I also have this responsibility to that legacy. I tried to answer 2 questions in one.
Oh, how did the history and research become a major part of your methodology in your working process?
Oh, I think I'm going to give a nod to how I was educated. Where do I start this story? So I'm the child of immigrants. My parents became American citizens before they died. They're both ancestors now. But my father was from Trinidad, my mother from Jamaica. And so they worked really hard. They understood that education was a really important thing in this nation. And in fact, my father came to the US to get his college education. And he went to Howard University, and he worked his way through Howard University and through medical school as a dark-skinned black man in the 40s. My father had a lot of quote-unquote menial jobs, right, to work his way through college. He did not take education lightly. So when he finally, reached a class in this country, he made sure that my sister and I got a good education, right? And good education under those standards in DC meant private school. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but that's what it meant. And so I went to the kind of school that led me to the kind of college, Amherst College, where I currently teach, which is a liberal arts college, right? And that has everything to do with figuring out how you connect across disciplines, right? So how do you connect history to math to art, right? How do you, I teach a class now at my alma mater as an artist with a chemist about color, right? So to me, this way of taking history and making it very real, making it tangible, asking questions through the work, that's the power of being an artist. And I would never shirk that responsibility. The way in which histories are getting erased, we can fill them in. So that whole, see how none of you knew the truce flag, right? But now you do, right? And the artwork goes farther than the actual historical object, right? That goes in and out every once in a while on display at the Smithsonian. But my pieces, because I made a whole body of work around that, they go lots of places. Not far enough, because none of you raised your hands. But that's the power of being an artist. And so I take that power and that responsibility very seriously. Oh, one more question. I think I don't know, maybe because they're recording and because also we're streaming, so people will want to hear you.
I know. Thank you again for the speech. It was great. In that last comment, you mentioned kind of a difference between the East Coast and the West Coast. I wonder if you have...
I did?
It felt like maybe you were talking about like Amherst and DC and like what a good education meant there, because that's where you grew up and that was
yeah, but I
context.
didn't mean that as an East Coast, West Coast thing.
That's my question, though. Have you noticed a difference, especially in your time here in residency, in the attitudes towards art or the attitudes towards your message or the way people are receiving things?
Yeah, so I have only been in art spaces since I've been back in the Pacific Northwest. I've been here a couple of times. This is my second time to the Seattle area, my first time to Tacoma. And the last time I was here, I was on vacation. So I do not have any real assessment. I also am very hesitant to make broad, sweeping generalizations about anything. I don't know you all well enough, so keep on inviting me back so I can know you better. See what I did there? Okay. Are there any other questions for me? Yes. Wait. Can we mic you? He needs exercise. He needs some exercise. Asking me 3 questions in one. Come on now.
This is very short, but thank you.
Hold the mic really close.
This is a short comment, but thank you for the learning that I have gained from your talk today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, do we have any more questions from the audience? All right.
Okay, if you can't see very well, just how do you thread a needle?
I can't hear you.
How do you thread a needle if you don't see well? I need that information.
Oh, I could show you because it's an embodied knowledge, but I can explain it to you.
Okay.
So I will also tell you that my grandmother died when I was 10. And so I also want to just hold this space to say that everybody called my grandmother Chummy. Like I never called her grandma because she was everybody's friend. So we all called her Chummy. And we all of my cousins, that generation, we always like, but she lived with us. She was very present. When she was with you, she was really with you, right? So the way that you thread a needle, if you don't have good eyesight, is that you needle the thread. Some people are nodding. So it's hard for me to show you because I'm holding a mic, and also it looks a little obscene. But I can describe it this way. You hold the thread very, very short, like it's just a hair that might be plucked, like just stubble. And then you place the eye of the needle over that, as opposed to having a long thread that you're trying to get into the needle. And my students, when I showed it to them the first time, they don't trust that it would work. And I said, you have to trust and you have to believe in the magic, and it'll work. And then it works. And then they're really grateful because they're threading lots of needles. Right. Yeah, I wish I could show you. Yeah, yeah.
All right, any more questions?
Oh. I'm really appreciating these questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I think your work is wonderful. Is there some place that we get more information about you and your work?
So two things. One is a very outdated website.
Oh.
Very outdated. That should really be updated, but at sonyaclark.com. Yeah, just Sonya spelled with a Y. That's the only thing you have to remember. Sonya, SONYACLARK.com. Also, because I've been doing this for 30 years or so, if you just Googled me, you would find things that would come up. The unraveled and unraveling pieces got a lot of attention in the wider press, like BBC World News and that sort of thing, but mainly because of that point in America reckoning with its history and its current self. And then there are books out there. There are a couple of catalogs of my work out there if you're interested in that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
I have two questions.
Okay.
So one,
And you acknowledge that you had two questions,
yes,
unlike
I
some
had two
people.
questions. So my first question is, how many eyes did you create for this project? And was it like specifically, did you like choose a specific number for that? And then my second question is, you said you were going to fill them with marigolds. Are they going to be real, pressed, or glass, or something else?
Okay, so the first question is how many eyes? So I tried to make, when I made the decals for the irises in Photoshop, so I made irises in Photoshop, sent them to a decal shop that makes decals specifically for glass, right, so that they can withstand the heat. I tried to make like a variation that is kind of representation of the world. So most people in the world are brown-eyed, and then a few people in the world are blue-eyed and green-eyed, and then hazel-eyed, right, which is starts getting towards brown, right, and green-eyed. So I have this variation of all of those: brown, light brown, hazel, blue, green, right? So I have 6 different colors. Oh, and then yellow. There's a yellow one. Because of the marigolds, I just wanted like a yellow eye. I don't know anyone with yellow eyes, but a yellow eye. Anyway, so there's those are the 6 colors that are represented, and so I wanted to make at least one for each of the colors. In terms of what goes in them, so this is the thing. When I went to Pilchuck first, I thought they were going to be, I was going to make the whole thing and they would be enclosed, so whatever I put in there was going to remain fixed in there. And then we came upon the way of making it a jar so that it can open and close. And now I can fill it with whatever I want. Like originally I thought marigolds, but now, and glass marigolds, right? Because they were going to be encased in there, and then you'd see through the iris to the marigold, right? But now it could be live marigolds because they can be taken in and out. I've also thought, don't tell anyone, I've also thought that now that they're jars, I might leave one open and ask people to put the names of people who are not seen inside of them as a kind of ritual act, right? Yeah, so lots of ideas have emerged from me shifting to a better way of making them. It opened up opportunity. Thank you for that question. I think I really have to go to work, though, you all. It's my last day. I appreciate the questions, though. There's an abundance of questions. That means a lot to me and gives me a lot to think about, too. So I appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your day here. All right? Thank you.